Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, General Dempsey, I'd like to begin by thanking the two of you for being here this morning and for your extended service. I will say, Secretary Panetta, I regret that you and I have not had the opportunity to work together since I'm a new member of this committee. But I will tell you, you have over many years earned a reputation for being fair-minded, for looking for bipartisan compromise, and for looking for solutions. Indeed, I will pass on a comment that was made to me by a more senior Republican on this committee about you, in which you were characterized as a, quote, straight shooter, which, as you know, in Washington is both a rare compliment and a very high compliment. And so I want to thank you for your principled dedication to this country and your long service. And I want to likewise thank you, General Dempsey, for your service, your many decades defending the nation, and your passionate commitment to standing with the men and women of the military and protecting the interest of the United States. It is my hope that this hearing can be a helpful moment in terms of learning productive lessons learned from the tragic attack at Benghazi. And what I would like to focus on principally is the window between when the attack began and 5:15 in the morning when Navy SEALs Glenn Dougherty and Tyrone Woods lost their lives. There are roughly 7.5 hours there. And I recognize that in any military conflict, one inevitably faces the proverbial fog of war. But what I'd like to ask you to do is use the 2020 hindsight we have now. If you could go back in time with the knowledge you have today and play it over again, if at 9:42 p.m. Benghazi time, when the first attack began, you knew that at 5:15 a.m. two former SEALs would be on the roof of that annex and would face mortar fire, what specifically could have been done if we had that knowledge? And I recognize that is a hypothetical, but if we had that knowledge, what military options would there have been to prevent that loss of life and to stop that attack at the annex?
Senator, as you said, it's tough to respond to a hypothetical. Look, as long as we're talking about hypotheticals, the best that would have happened here is that we would have had a heads up and we would have had troops on the ground to protect that facility. That's the best scenario, and that's what works the best. Once an attack takes place, the biggest problem you have is getting accurate information about exactly what is taking place in order to then develop what response you need to do it. You can't just willy-nilly send F-16s there and blow the hell out of a place without knowing what's taking place. You can't send AC-130s there and blow the hell out of a target without knowing what's taking place. You've got to be able to have good information about what is taking place in order to be able to effectively respond.
So in your judgment, if I understand you correctly, the most effective means would have been to have boots on the ground.
That's right.
If, and again this is a hypothetical, at 9:42 p.m. you had received a direct order to have boots on the ground to defend our men and women there, what is the absolute fastest that could have been carried out?
Well, based on the posture, our posture at the time, it would have been N+6 plus transit time with the closest ground force available, and so you're looking at something best case between 13 and 15 hours.
So if I understand your testimony correctly, that in your military judgment that there was no way conceivably to get troops on the ground sooner than 13 to 15 hours.
That's correct.
How about assets like an AC-130? if you had received an order at the outset to deploy an aircraft like an AC-130, what would have been the absolute fastest it could have arrived at Benghazi?
I don't even know exactly where they were, but I know there were no AC-130s in anywhere near North Africa that night.
I'd like to also spend a few moments on the decision making as this crisis unfolded. I take it neither of you received the hypothetical order at any point to get boots on the ground immediately.
No, that's right.
Now both of you mentioned that at 5 p.m. D.C. time, you met with President Obama for a regularly scheduled meeting during which you discussed the attack at Benghazi that had happened about an hour and 20 minutes earlier. You said the total meeting lasted roughly 30 minutes. How much of the meeting would you estimate covered Benghazi?
We teed up that issue when we walked into the Oval Office, so I would say that the first 15 or 20 minutes was spent on the concern about that, as well as Cairo and what might happen there.
And after that 15 or 20 minutes discussion of Benghazi, do I understand your testimony correct that neither of you had any subsequent conversations with the President the rest of that day and that evening?
Well, we continued to talk. I think we teed up some other issues that we were dealing with at the time to inform the President, and then once that concluded, we both went back to the Pentagon, and immediately I ordered the deployment of these forces into place.
In between 9:42 p.m. Benghazi time, when the first attack started, and 5:15 a.m., when Mr. Dougherty and Mr. Woods lost their lives, what conversations did either of you have with Secretary Clinton?
We did not have any conversations with Secretary Clinton.
So, and General Dempsey, the same is true for you. And one final question, because my time has expired. Senator Lee asked you about securing the compound and noted that it took some 23 days to do so, and I think to the astonishment of many viewers, we had CNN news crews discovering what appeared to be sensitive documents rather than U.S. forces or law enforcement. And I just want to make sure I understood your answer correctly, in that you said that you were not requested to secure the compound, and had you been requested to secure the compound, in your judgment, the U.S. military could have done so and could have done so effectively?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of areas of brief inquiry. I want to make sure I understand your testimony from earlier this morning correctly, that you said post 9/11, the State Department requested additional security in Yemen, and DOD has provided that additional security. Is that?
No, pre 9/11.
Oh, that was pre 9/11.
Right.
Is it correct then that had the Department of State responded to the request from the ambassador for additional security and requested from DOD additional security, that would have been provided in Benghazi as well?
Yeah, I do want to, yes, if we had been asked, we would have responded. But I also want to make it clear, I'm not clear on whether the embassy in Tripoli ever sent a request. I don't think they did. I think they were still in internal deliberations inside of Tripoli.
And if the State Department had requested additional security so that there was additional boots on the ground in Benghazi, is it your military judgment that that would have prevented the loss of 4 lives, including our ambassador in Benghazi on September 11th?
You know, that's honestly, not dodging the question. That's a hypothetical. It's just actually hard to process. I think, first of all, the request would have come in to put augmentation in Tripoli. And then the question would have been, could you get to Tripoli and back? But we could very well have put lift there and to support it. So it's so hypothetical, I just can't answer it.
In your judgment, would additional troops on the ground in Benghazi have prevented the loss of life from the assault that we sustained?
additional or any troops on the ground in Benghazi would have added to the security of the consulate.
All right, one other topic that has not been focused on yet. A lot of this focus has been on the events of September 11th and September 12th, and I'd like to shift to the nearly 5 months that have transpired since then, and ask about the topic of retribution. A number of terrorists murdered 4 Americans, including the U.S. ambassador. To the extent you are able, in an open hearing, I would like to know what our progress is in tracking down those terrorists and exacting serious retribution.
I mean, obviously a fuller explanation ought to be done in a more classified setting. But what we have is an FBI team was immediately assembled that involves the CIA plus DOD. And that team has made very good progress in identifying individuals that were associated with that attack. We now have a list of those that we are all looking for to determine exactly where they're located. And I think the Justice Department is part of that team, and also trying to see what kind of cases can be developed should we either be able to capture or detain them in some way.
Two final questions. Had the compound been secured in a timely manner, rather than 23 days later, do you think that would have assisted in the effort to track down who committed these acts of terrorism?
You know, again, hard to tell what the crowd did there and what that scene looked like. But obviously, the ability to get into a scene and gather evidence just based on my own legal background, anything you find can help you make a case.
Right. And my final question, in the months that have followed since then, we have seen other terrorist attacks. We have seen, tragically, a suicide bomber in Ankara in Turkey, and we have seen the horrific attack in Algeria that murdered, among others, 2 Texans, Victor Lovelady and Frederick Butaccio. Do you think the lack of a public, visible response and retribution for this terrorist attack may have had the effect of emboldening those who would seek to do harm and take the lives of Americans? Senator,
these people are emboldened, period. Their basic intent is to go after our citizens, to go after our facilities, to attack us in any way possible. And I don't think we ought to be surprised that they are making every effort to try to do that in every location that is convenient for them. So I would just tell you that I am not surprised by the fact that we see these attacks take place, because that is what this enemy does, and that's why we have to do everything possible to make sure that al-Qaeda never has that opportunity.
Do you agree with the reports that have suggested that Osama bin Laden was emboldened by what he perceived as the lack of vigorous response of the United States to prior terrorist attack, and that was a contributing factor to September 11th, 2001?
You know, they were planning that for a long time, and I think a lot of this has been gone over time and time again. But the reality is that at some point, I think they were going to try to conduct an attack that would make clear to the world their intent to come after the United States, and they were successful at doing that. I will tell you this, that as a result of what happened on 9/11 and the fact that we have gone at them in every way possible, I think it is because of that effort that we have been able to deter attacks up to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.